What's going on, guys? It's Asuka Libre, and today I'll be going over Warlock and Mythic Plus. I'll be covering all three specs as well as the specific builds as well as some off builds for Warlock. I'll be covering talents, legendaries, soulbinds, trinkets, and stats, whatever you'd really need to get started playing the class. If you like any of the weak ores or add-ons, you can pop on my Twitch, grab them from there, as well as my Discord as well. So, starting off with Affliction, we're going to be running the generic Aoe build. This is the one you're going to see pretty much like everybody use in the mid-range keys. This is going to give you the most AoE damage output in the shortest amount of time possible. So we're going to be running Drain Soul, Absolute Corruption, Vile Taint, Dark Color, and Dark Soul Misery. Drain Soul's your pretty much your default. It allows you to shard snipe, it allows you to stack your Shadow's Embrace. Generally, overall, pretty good. The other two talents, Nightfall's okay. But since Shadow Embrace exists, Shadow Bolt's not really that viable, and ID, you don't really run it unless you're in like PvP scenarios, which it's Mythic Plus, right? Nothing's happening. For the secondary row, we have Absolute Corruption. It makes your corruption permanent. It's amazing for just doing trash packs. You set your corruption and you pretty much forget about it. It's very nice. Vile Taint's great because it allows you to place a dot on everything in an AoE circle, like so. Dot on everything, which means your raptures are just going to do that much more damage. Then we have Dark Collar. This makes your Dark Player a 2-minute cooldown down from 3 minutes, which makes it perfectly line up with Dark Soul Misery. This is going to give you strong AoE burst every 2 minutes, which is great. It's great. You need more damage. It's what you want. Now, I'd only recommend this build really for the 15 to 16 keystone range, and I'd definitely not recommend this build if you're running with something like a mage and a hunter, who are just going to have their cooldowns up around the time you are, but the problem is they're gonna burst the pack down quicker than you can get your dots out, which means the pack's just gonna die, and by the time you get your dots out and you pop your dark layer, you get like one rapture, and then it's like, oh, pack's dead. Nice damage, right? So if you're running with a mage and hunter, I wouldn't really recommend this build. But if you're not going to be running with a super meta comp like that, you could just run this build. It's pretty generic. It gets you into really well into pugs. You know, it looks good, and it does a pretty good amount of damage. Now moving on to a different build. This one is going to be preferred for more of like the 17 to 18 key range, or if you're running with the mage and hunter, this is going to allow you to kind of, I'd say, balance your damage and kind of find where you're going to get the most value out of it. So let me just remove corruption from all these guys. So the generic build I was going to be talking about here was going to be running Drain Soul, Absolute Corruption, Phantom Singularity, Haunt, and a Dark Soul Misery. Now, this build's pretty good as it's going to still give you good AoE, but it'll allow you to push way more single target damage due to Phantom and Haunt being a thing. On fortified weeks, you could stick with the Vile Taint, and on Tyrannical, you could swap it to Phantom. Vile Taint is not really great on single target, but Phantom will give you a lot more, but it's just a less AoE for Phantom, right? Because it's a cleave, whereas Valtane puts a dot and everything, which gives you more rapture damage. So you kind of have to, depending on the keystone, swap between the two, I'd say. I'd recommend this specifically for like a 17, 18 key, you know, the mid range, the mid high range keys, I guess, where you're going to, you know, want AoE, but at the same time do way more in single target as you're going to be playing to your strengths that way. You're going to be playing to Affliction strengths that way. Now, the opener, it's pretty simple with this as well. You're gonna apply your Seed of Corruption, go into a Haunt. UA, grow your agonies on a bunch of stuff. Pop your Dark Soul, pop your Phantom on your primary targets, Soul Rot, Dark Lair, Trinket ratio, and go from there. Pretty simple stuff. I wouldn't. It's the most generic opener, I guess, right? Now, there is going to be one more build, and this one is. You're going to be finding it more on the high key range, even on fortified weeks. Things for like a 19 plus, you're going to see people actually run just the pure single target Affliction build. There's going to be Drain Soul, Siphon, Phantom, Haunt, and Dark Soul Misery. This is going to be pure single target. Your AoE, it's going to be good still, right? You're still going to be able to get your seed, or you're still going to be able to get your corruptions out. Phantom's still going to do its cleave. The only problem is you're going to have one more delta damage, which is Siphon, which you'd really only put on your priority target and maybe the secondary target after that. This is going to make you do a lot of damage on bosses and Prideful. You can burst on Prideful Pack or Prideful Mob really easily with this, and you're going to be able to absolutely destroy bosses. The only thing is you're going to have to make it line up with your gotta make your CDs line up with the boss, and so you kind of have to watch the timing on that. Most of the time, you're gonna see Warlocks for this only in higher keys, even on fortified weeks, just because if you're running with the Mage Hunter to push those high keys and stuff like that, or even like the Moonkins, you're going to want to kind of find where your damage is going to be more valued. The last build I'm going to go over is actually the Corrupting Leer build. Now this one is pretty interesting. So Corrupting Leer is a conduit which reads your UA and Agony have a chance to reduce the cooldown of your Dark Lair by 5 seconds. Now, so yeah, with the Corrupting Leer build, you're going to want to run the Haunt still, and you're going to want to run AC or Siphon and Viletane. It kind of depends on the keystone where you're at. The Siphon is going to be Siphon Haunt's going to be really good for your single target, while the Absolute Corruption Viletane is going to be really good for AoE more or less, but still giving you good single target because you run the Haunt. So it kind of depends on where you're going to value your damage. For personally, I'd say I recommend running the Phantom Singularity, Absolute Corruption, and Haunt. That's kind of going to be like the default choice for the Corrupting Leer build specifically, in my opinion. As for the Soulbinds and Conduits, you're going to be running Nia along with Focus Malignancy. The only other difference is you're going to be swapping this Potency Conduit to pretty much 3 different things. So for the AoE build, you're going to want to run Rolling Agony. For the more single target builds, you're going to be running Cold Embrace. You also run Cold Embrace on any of the higher keystone levels. And for Corrupting Leer, you're going to obviously run the Corrupting Leer Conduit. This is all with Focus Malignancy. Once you hit the 30 Renown mark, we're going to be swapping over to Nia's Tools Burst, which means you're going to get another Endurance slot here. This is only true for everything except the Corrupting Leer build, which you're going to keep the second Potency Conduit anyways. So moving on to Legendaries and Trinkets for Affliction. So you're going to be running Relic of Demonic Synergy. This is by far the best Legendary for Affliction. There's really no debate here. It's just good in Mythic Plus and in Raid. It's okay in PvP, or it's okay in PvP if you're not running like Grimoire Sacrifice, but I wouldn't recommend it. So this is purely for like the PvE scenario stuff. And you're also gonna run what I'm running is badge. I'm running the 2 PvP badges, but the other things you could run are Soul Lighting Rupee and the Beaver Trinket, the Unbound Changeling. That's both very good. You could also run Instructor's Divine Bell if you do not have a badge yourself. It's pretty close in terms of damage. The other thing is that you could run our like Glyph. It does a lot of damage. Its damage is increased with Haunt, but for me personally, I prefer the double badge. Having a 1-minute cooldown on the badge lines up with your Soul Rot. It just makes the spec flow nicely. Moving on to Destruction. Now, Destruction definitely has fallen off recently in Shadowlands, but it still performs pretty well in anything that's a I'd say a 14 or lower. Anything 15 or above, you'd play Affliction, and 14 and lower, the lower keys. Destruction has a lot more upfront damage than Affliction, which means that you're going to be able to burst down packs really quickly in comparison to Affliction. So for the Talon setup, I'd say it's pretty generic, and it's true for both Tyrannical and Fortified. You're not really going to change it too much in Mythic Plus. So first off, you have your Flashover, followed by Reverse Entropy. You're going to be running Cataclysm. It's going to be able to get your Immolates out in pretty much one go, and which means you're going to be able to focus on your other things. You're going to run Reign of Chaos. It's going to make it so you can summon a lot of Infernals and do a lot of Immolation Aura damage. And you're also going to run Channel Demon Fire instead of Dark Soul's ability. And Dark Soul is not really worth it right now. Channel Demon Fire just has a lot of value in Mythic, being able to do just a lot of AoE damage. Moving on to the Legendaries and Trinkets, you're going to be running Wilfred's Sigil of Superior Summoning, or Wrist Wraps of Superior Summoning, I guess it's here. But this makes it so your Summon Infernal is going to be on a less cooldown. Pretty much going to be lined up with the 2 minutes mark. If you're spending enough shards, it just makes it so you're going to be able to Infernal quicker, and you're going to be pumping out more AoE damage that way. I'd also recommend you run, again, the badges. The badge is really good. Again, on a 1 minute cooldown, gives you in some primary stat. It just works out really well. You could also choose to run like Soul Lighting Ruby. It gives you a lot of crit. Having your things crit's always nice. But for me personally, yeah, badge is the way to go. And on like your passive one, you could run like the Unbound Changeling instead of this. It's totally up to you. I just don't have a high item level one. Moving on to Conduits here. Unfortunately, I'd love to respec my Conduits, but the energy system exists, and I don't have infinite of that. Blizzard, please remove the energy system. So anyways, starting off for the first potency conduit, you want Ashen Remains. This is like your mandatory potency conduit, similar to like Focus Malignancy. It just makes your Chaos Bolts and Incinerates deal much more damage to your targets with Immolate. It's always great. The other ones you could rotate to are these three here. So you have Combustion Engine, Infernal Brand, and Duplicitous Havoc. Personally, for me, I'd run Infernal Brand on the second potency slot for Mythic Plus, because you're going to be, having a lot of Infernals due to Reign of Chaos. Your Infernal Brands are just going to work and make your Infernals do more Immolation damage. Plus, with Wilfred's, you're just going to be, it's just a lot of Infernal damage. It just works out. You could run Combustion Engine as well if you prefer to kind of have more of a rely more on like your non-infernal abilities. It's up to you. Personally, for me though, I'd run Infernal Brand. And Duplicitous Havoc, it's okay, but I just don't think it's there. Like I've done a bit of testing with it. It's just not. I just don't see the point really for Duplicitous Havoc to be a thing right now. Moving into the 30 Renown 30, you're going to be going Needs Tools Burrs. It just does more damage than the Cold Embrace. And unfortunately, Destro Conduits outside of Ashen Remains, they're not very good, right? Needs Tools Burrs is just worth it. So yeah, next week, basically, we're swapping. Into the rotation for Destruction here, you're going to want to open up with a Cataclysm, followed by a Soul Rot, Channel Demon Fire, and you're going to want to drop the Rock, go into a Rain of Fire, and you're going to want the Havoc, get your trait ratio rolling, and on pure AoE, you're just going to start dumping your Rain of Fires, or your shards into Rain of Fire, while keeping your Immolates up. Once your Channel Demon Fire is off cooldown, go ahead and shoot that again, and you're just, again, it's just like a thing where it's build shards, spend it on Rain of Fire, and you keep going from there, and it does pretty good AoE damage. Now, let's say you have a priority target, right? Let's say there's a squad leader. Your Spire's Ascension, there's a squad leader, it's a 3-pack. Generally what you're going to do, when you go for your Havoc, you're actually just going to Conflag, and you're going to want to just Chaos Bolt. Now, Chaos Bolt, it did get a bit of a buff. It's not amazing still, but it does do the job in single target, the 2 target scenarios. So if there is a priority mob you should be bursting down, I do not recommend going for Rain of Fire. I'd recommend just purely going for Chaos Bolt. Moving on to everyone's favorite spec, we got Demonology here. So it's definitely fallen off going to Shadowlands, but it's still there within our hearts. So going on to the more I'd say generic build, we have a Demonic Strength, followed by Demonic Calling, Summon Vile Fiend, Grimoire Felguard, and Demonic Consumption. You can definitely swap Demonic or Summon Vile Fiend for Soul Strike if you wish, but Tyrant gets a lot of value through Summon Vile Fiend here. I'll be showing you the rotation for this build specifically, and that we can go into the other build, which is going to be the dog build, which is one that's come up and it's kind of popular, but not. I don't think it's the best build, I'd say. Going into the Soulbinds and Conduits, we're going to be running Nia, and you're going to run Born of Blood. Unfortunately, I can't swap them because again, Conduit energy. I don't want to have to waste it, I guess. So yeah, Born of Blood is pretty much your mandatory one, similar to your Pope's Malignancy and Ashen Remains. Born of Blood will give you more demonic cores, and it just works out, makes the spec flow really well. The other one I'd recommend going would be Fel Commando. This is going to make your Felguard do more damage and take less damage. Really, it just makes your demonic strength that much better. It makes your soul strike, if you choose to run it, that much better. And once we go into the Renown 30, you're just going to swap the burrs and abandon the second potency conduit, so you'll only be running Born of Blood. Going into the trinkets and the legendary. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. We're going to be running Wilfred's Sigil of Superior Summoning, or Wisraps of Superior Summoning, I guess. This makes it so your demonic tyrant is going to be pretty much a 1 minute cooldown. Right now it's a 1.5. You can read the tooltip right there on the bottom right. It says it's a 1.5 minute cooldown, basically 2 minutes. You can get them down to 1 minute very easily with Wilfred's. And personally, I'm going to be choosing to run bad because your demonic tyrant is basically 1 minute. The badge lines up really well, and it lines up with your soul rot, and everything makes it go really smoothly. Alright, so moving into the rotation for Demonology, so you're going to want to open a Demon Bolt, followed by a Hand of Gul'dan called Dreadstalkers, and you're going to want to build up 5 shards. Afterwards, you're going to want to do another Hand of Gul'dan, and then you're going to do Summon Vile Fiend, Grimoire Felguard. So here's the Hand of Gul'dan, here's the Summon Vile Fiend, here's the Grimoire Felguard, and you're going to want to use the 2 charges you get from your dogs to do 1 more hand, go into a Soul Rot, and then you go into your Tyrant, the Demonic Strength Trinket, and go from there. Then you pick up your shards, get your procs out, and you're going to want to start spamming imps. This is pretty much the most generic opener I'd say going for Demonology. It gives you pretty good damage in a short window. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple. Demonology tends to be pretty scary for people at first, but once you get used to it, it's pretty fun. Next up, we're going to move into the Call Dreadstalkers build. Now, this build, it's popped up about, I don't know, a little while ago, I'd say. Personally, for me, I do not think it's better than this build, but it is a pretty fun build that you could run as well. So that involves using Dread Lash from the shadows here. That can't swap because it's on cooldown. There we go. So use Dread Slash from the shadows along with the Nias as your soulbind, and you're going to run Carnivorous Stalkers and Born of Blood. This is going to make it so your Dread Stalkers have a chance to trigger a Dread Bite, and when your Dread Stalker's Dread Bite, and now deals AoE damage and does more damage, and also has a chance to, or makes it so they take 20% more Shadow Flame damage from the shadows. The entire build revolves around your dogs, so you're pretty much using dogs on and off cooldown. As for rotation, it's almost basically identical to the one I just showed you, with the exclusion of obviously you do not have a Vile Fiend and Demonic Strength now. You just have dogs. So all in all, you'd pretty much get to summon your Tyrant earlier, which means that you don't, which means you extend the duration of your dogs, and you just have fun. That's really it. I can't show you the build really because I don't have obviously the conduits to do it, uh, or at least the conduits in there to do it. But the again rotation very similar to the one I just showed you there. Now moving on to some of the more generic warlock things, it's kind of the more utility based stuff of kind of like what you can do to help your team succeed. So obviously we have access to an AoE stun due to Shadow Fury. It's very good. Uh, Not a lot of classes have access to an AoE stun. The only difference is we have to cast it. It's not instant, but it works when it works. We also have curses, the slow curse of exhaustion. It's really good, and you can also, you can choose to run curse of tongues, curse of weakness. They're all good in their own scenario. It really depends. Personally, for me, I think curse of exhaustion's incredibly good for Mythic Plus. Things like the spiteful mob. People have a hard time cutting that. Warlocks were generally slow. You can just throw curse of exhaustion on the ones that are targeting you, and have a good time. We also have access to Banish. This is good. It's mainly for niche scenarios. If there's an elemental or some other demon you can banish, you can just throw it out there. You could technically banish a spiteful ad. I wouldn't recommend it because they don't die and it's going to keep you in combat forever. But let's say you're in a tight spot and you can't kite, you could banish it if you choose to. And obviously we have the health stones. They're great. It's just a nice 25% heal. Your group will thank you for it at some point. Whether they like it or not, they will thank you for it. We do also have Fear. It's not as good as Polymorph, not as good as a Freezing Trap, but as like if the mob wanders into a pack, it does put them in combat, but it does have its niche scenarios if you're trying to get a mob off of someone, let's say first boss, a theater pain, you have Zad, like targets someone, stuns them, does a bunch of damage, you could fear it off them, and you never have to really deal with Zav ever again. So anyways, that's going to be the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys would like, drop a like, follow, and subscribe there. It's up to you. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just here to give as much information as I possibly can to you guys. This has been my first informational YouTube video, so it's a bit of a new thing for me. I'd say I mainly only stream. Really, I don't do this type of thing. But this is the first time doing it. But yeah, I do stream on Twitch again for you guys who missed it. It's from Monday to Thursday usually, and starting around the afternoon, going into the evening and nights area. If you guys like the UI, you can pick it up from my Twitch and Discord. It's available to Twitch subscribers. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and catch you guys in the next one. Take care.